Yo, what is going on, guys? This is Trev CL, and today we are here for Week 1 PPL Power Rankings. Now, unfortunately, this week we are not going to be joined by my good buddy and fellow co-host of the Power Rankings, Verd, as between his busy work schedule and just our time zones, we were not able to. He was not able to be able to follow all the games, and also we just couldn't schedule a good time to record together. So it'll just be me soloing it this time. Hopefully this shouldn't happen too often, if hopefully not ever again, if possible. But enough of that. It'll just be me for this video, so hopefully you don't find me too boring. Hopefully you didn't find me too boring in the first video, because again, it'll just be me. So why don't we go ahead and get straight into the rankings. At number 12 we have Jordinas and his Southampton Sneasels. Now, in the preseason power rankings, I had him number 12 because not having a ground immunity or resist was a huge deal to me. Like, being able to just put a scarf on any ground type Pokemon and outspeeding his entire team and really doing a killer job against his team is going to be a common thing I'm going to be seeing from him this season until he makes a transaction to fix that. That's just my belief. I feel like he's every time somebody's going to bring a scarf ground type or a setup ground type and just destroy him, and that's kind of what happened in this battle. Now I'm going to more talk about his side of his battle against Eric, and then when I get to Eric, who you see is up at number 4, I'll kind of go on to Eric's side. But he got a little bit lucky with the fact that Eric misclicked, although Eric also just played poorly around the Z Rain Dance Manaphy. Really, he obviously misclicked going into Weavile, and that cost him his Raikou, because then he didn't go into Raikou in time, and by the time he did go into Raikou, Manaphy was already set up enough to be able to kill it with Rain boosted like +2 or +3 Scald. And but after that, he did misplay with the Manaphy by going for rest on the last turn of Rain, as basically he went for rest and then Rain ended, so then he had a sleeping Manaphy that was guaranteed to sleep for 2 turns, and also it could not get the speed boost because it already used the Z move. So really at that point, his best Pokemon on his team was already useless at that point, and it was also only at about 60%, I believe it was. No, actually it was about full health, but it was about 40% because it did take a Facade or a Power Whip from the Delmise, I do believe. So it was 60%, it was asleep, and it wasn't able to use its Z move anymore. So at that point, it was basically useless, and from there, sub SD Lando, as he wasn't carrying Foul Play on his Sableye, I believe. He didn't go for it, so I don't know if he had a team builder and I missed it, but I do believe he did not have Foul Play on his Sableye, so that just allowed Lando to set up a sub for free on the Willow, and then set up an SD in front of the Sableye, keep it sub, and then it was GG from there, as Lando just clean slept him, got a clean 4 kills, and I think that's going to be a common pattern for Jordan, unless he can get a ground resist or immunity in transactions. And honestly, even if he does win a game, I'm going to be hard pressed to move him more than a spot or 2, if at all, if he doesn't make those transactions. So hopefully he'll make a transaction, fix that up a little bit, patch that up, and I will definitely like his team a lot better if he does. Next we have the Norwich Skitty. I hope I said that right. I know it's pronounced a little differently than it actually looks, because of the English name, and that is coached by the Don Fanatic, also known as just Jack, and he was actually playing against Better Jack this week, and unfortunately Better Jack's name did run true, as Better Jack was able to beat the Lesser Jack, and that is why the Norwich Skitty are number 11. Now, they were number 10 last week, and I'll explain when I get to the Bouffalant Bills and Makati why Makati is now a little bit higher, even though they both lost, and he was lower originally. But, it just seems like, from what Jack said in his commentary, that he prepped heavily for the Bulu Trancor, and neither of those came. So basically at that point, he was kind of effed a little bit. Like, he just didn't have, like, he prepped so much for that he wasn't prepared for stuff like Scarf Tauros, and then the modest solar power Heliolisk with choice specs just absolutely destroyed him. He had no switch-ins to it. His like check to it was Gastrodon, which either way, Gastrodon isn't a really good Helios check anyway because of Grass Knot. And like, I don't know, he was like, the Necrozma was doing well for a while, but one mistake I do think, one thing I think he should have run was Moonlight, because in the sun that gives it like 75% health instead of 50, and it would have been really nice because he was a Life Orb Necrozma. So because I believe he was Dark Pulse, Psychic, Earthquake, and then I believe a setup move. I'm sorry if my memory's a little foggy. It's kind of hard to remember everything, but I believe he was set up 3 attacks. I think Moonlight 3 attacks would have been a little bit better. I do agree with like the offensive moves he brought, because obviously Dark Pulse for the Latios, Psychic for Psychic Stab, and then Earthquake for like Tran, Ninetales, all that good stuff. Heliolisk if the grassy terrain is not up. But like, he didn't play terribly. I mean, it was only a 3-0, so he was able to, despite heavily over prepping for Bulu and Heatran, he was able to definitely preserve some differential. But in the end, Scarf Tauros was just able to clean with Body Slam, and that was the game. So up next, we have the Buffalont Bills, Makati, also known as Will, and he played the number 1 team from the preseason in Shoddy, so obviously losing to him wasn't like, a huge loss at all. And the reason I did put him above Jack was because between the fact that his opponent was like, the number 1 team, and like it was a bit worse of a loss, although he did make some really big over predictions that if he would have like predicted correctly, he might have been able to make it a 2-0 or a 3-0 instead of 4-0. So the over predictions, like he returned twice, I believe, with Pinsir on the Jirachi. Although I believe the second one would have been able to, the second return didn't matter quite as much because Jirachi would have been able to live the Earthquake. But if he would have Earthquaked the first time, then he would have been able to kill the Jirachi. But the main thing is that the reason why he's above Jack is because he did make some transactions for after week 1 that will take into effect week 2. And basically, my problem with his team before was that it was a little too passive. Like, he mainly had to rely on Mega Pinsir as his win con from every game, whereas pretty much every coach had at least 2 to 3 Pokemon they could rely on every game as win cons. But he fixed that as he dropped his Sandcore and I believe one of his other Pokemon, I can't remember off the top of my head, but he did pick up Zygarde 10%, Zydoge, and the Nihilego. So those are 2 huge offensive threats. Like, Nihilego, Zygarde, and Mega Pinsir pair really well together, I feel. So like that's huge. And also Nihilego gives him a special attacker that can be a win con from week to week. So like, I mean, his special attackers I felt were all like, his best special attacker before this move was Delphox. So like, this is a huge improvement special attacking wise. And now he has like he still was able to keep a rocker in Nihilego and get T-Spikes, an additional T-Spiker. So that's really good for his team, definitely. But I feel like the combination of that plus the caliber of opponent he was playing, the caliber of team he was playing, was able to push him up above Jack, even though they both lost. And other than that, that's all I have to say about the Buffalont Bills. Moving on, we have the West Coast Wingulls. Now, and that is, the West Coast Wingulls are coached by Paul. Now, Paul did play Ruby, who was my preseason ranked number 3, and one thing you can definitely see if you watch the battle was that he prepped way too heavily for Hariyama and not enough for the rain. He didn't expect, from what I remember, and what I saw was that he did not expect rain to come. He expected like Hariyama, and Ruby just simply brought a team that he did not expect. So his Toxapex was Fizdef, his Gourgeist was Fizdef. At least his Toxapex should have been Spadef. Gourgeist honestly wasn't a big deal, although it probably should have been a bit more mixed defense to be able to take on Coco better. But Toxapex definitely should have been Spadef. So that was a real major bummer for him. And in the end, he let his Scizor get burned, which was kind of big, as it just let Scolipede be able to set up an SD for free and sweep him, as well as the fact that he had a Mian Shao in against a Mamoswine. It was obviously he was making what was you could consider a safe play, click and high jump kick, as Ruby sacked off the Pelipper. But the thing is, by click and high jump kick, he guaranteed an SD from Scolipede. Because if he had just clicked Stone Edge, even if he had stayed in with Mamoswine and it had not killed, it still would have been a safer play than click and high jump kick and letting Scolipede get up a free SD. And on the off chance Ruby did sack Pelipper like he did, then it had worked out great. So, you can consider it a safe play. I consider it, I think he had no choice but to click either Stone Edge or U-turn if he didn't want to lose to Scolipede. And unfortunately, he just made the wrong move, and that's what really cost him that in the Scizor burn. So, I don't think he played too poorly. And besides, the Toxapex prep, and then arguably the Gourgeist maybe, more the Toxapex, I feel like his prep was very solid as well. So, definitely, being 9 is not, too bad of a thing. He can definitely move way up, as he should continue winning, after this week, because I definitely know Paul is a good player, and while his team is a little weird to me, it is a good team, so he should be able to pick up some wins if he just learns to prep a little bit more for the scarier stuff and a little less for some of the lesser threats. But yeah, next up we have the Canberra Two Cannons, coached by Travesty. Trav, I believe PPL Season 3 champion. Yeah, that was the season he won. But he played Jolt and the Toronto Staraptors, and I'm not going to lie, he got pretty well whooped. It was a 4-0, but it was only a 4-0 because Diggersby died to Life Orb and Wild Charge Recoil. So, basically, Trav brought a team that was very, very susceptible to U-turn spam. His switch into Decidueye was Arcanine, which is usually fine, but the problem is that the obvious play for Jolt usually would be to click U-turn, and that's what Jolt did. Jolt was able to U-turn a lot and bring in Diggersby, which was a huge threat to Trav's team, and that really cost Trav it cost Trav basically any momentum he could ever muster, which I don't think he had any momentum at all throughout the battle. Jolt pretty much from turn 1 had all the momentum. And honestly, I would say he's probably lucky that Jolt didn't preserve the 6-0, because I feel like Jolt could have preserved at least a 5-0 by preserving Clefable. But, Jolt made his play, and Trav was able to end up at least scoring a few differential points off Diggersby dying and Jolt sacking Clefable. But he just had nothing for Diggersby, and that was probably a team prep thing. There's no way maybe he could have prepped for Diggersby that much, but he could have brought something like a Wakan Berry, Celesteela, Wakan more defensive, Primarina, even if it wasn't defensive, but maybe I believe he brought a Specs Primarina, so if he brought a Wakan Primarina with a little bit more defense, maybe not quite as hard hitting, but not quite defensive, he could have done something, maybe baited to Diggersby, been able to kill it, and then be in a pretty decent position, although Jolt had Defiant Thunderous, which every time Arcanine switched in, it would give it +1 attack. So I think at that point, Thunderous had the game won if Diggersby did not. But I just feel like Trav's prep was very lacking in this game. Didn't really prep for Diggersby as well as I think he could have. And I think that's what mainly lost him the game, as well as Jolt playing an incredible game. So, I mean, hats off to Jolt for playing an incredible game. But Trav's prep was definitely a little lacking, just in my opinion. No offense meant at all. I know Trav is an awesome prepper, but it just wasn't up to his stuff as it usually is. So that's what I have to say about the Canberra 2 cannons. Next up, we have the Melbourne Victory Star, coached by Better Jack Electric Storm, also as he's also known by. And I kind of touched on his match a little bit when I was talking about the Don Fanatic Jack, but he definitely brought a very good team. He was able to use threats like Heatran and Tapu Bulu in the team prep mind games, and then not bring them, because obviously those are huge threats that you have to prep for. So, kudos to him for not bringing those, because I would be very tempted to bring Bulu or Tran, or possibly even both, to a lot of games, if not all of them, just because that core is insane. Very good synergy with that core. They pretty much synergize perfectly, about as perfect as you can get. But the Specs Solar Power Heliolisk was definitely a really good idea, very good ring, as basically all Jack had, Lesser Jack had, was Gastrodon and also Goodra, but luckily he was able to get rid of the Goodra pretty early on by killing it with the Savali Fairy. But pretty much as soon as he got off one multi-attack, that was enough to put it in range of Heliolisk anyway. So by doing that, he pretty much opened the door for Heliolisk to absolutely thrash his opponent's team, as well as the Scarf Tauros. The Scarf Tauros put in a ton of work, especially after everything was weakened down, and he made sure that it wasn't in range of Mach Punch, so he didn't switch it in unnecessarily. He was able to keep it nice and healthy, and he was able to take a Mach Punch from Ape and then just sweep on from there. So definitely a well-played game on his part. Even though he didn't play the best of teams in terms of comparison to each other, Don Fanatic's team is not horrible. Obviously, it's just not as good as some of the other teams, but he was still able to show that his team is definitely a very scary team that, there's a lot of things to prep for. Bulu, Tran, Suncor, Latios, and he definitely showed that he can use it well. So we'll have to see how he does in upcoming weeks. Even though he did win, he did not move up at all, and I will kind of explain that up next when I explain the number 6 team, Kelly, Under the Radar, and his Maryland Torterrapins. Now, Kelly did lose to Mono, and the reason why I still have him in the top half is just because the caliber of player he was playing. Although I am not the biggest fan of Mono's team. I had him, I believe, 9th in the preseason power rankings. I am a big fan of Mono as a player. He's arguably maybe the best player in the league, up there with Shoddy, Trav, Jolt. It was a good game for both sides. It was a very close game. One thing that could have possibly been done, this is a little hazy, so I'm trying to remember exactly, but what he could have done is after his Kyurem died to the Flash Cannon from the Scarf Hydreigon, what he could have done is gone into his Babiri Berry Aromatisse, and then he could have wished up and then pass that wish into Greninja so that it would because Greninja at that point, even after Spikes and Rocks, would have been able to take a Flash Cannon, and then he would have been in really good position because he would have Aromatisse still around, so that the Hydreigon would be very tempted to possibly click Flash Cannon and make a prediction, but his Greninja would still be at full health, and it would basically, the Victini had one more switch in, so he could force out the Victini if it ever needed to click V-Trade against the Aromatisse, and then Victini would be dead at that point. Or if he made a particular double in which he predicted Victini. So let's just go through this scenario, okay? So he gets the wish back into... he gets a wish up with Aromatisse as the Hydreigon clicks Flash Cannon. That play right there is a 50-50, because honestly, Mono could have doubled into the Victini expecting the wish, and then the game's over at that point if Mono gets that right. It could also be that if he goes for wish, he Moonblasts, or he goes for wish as the Kofak comes out, and then he's able to keep his Aromatisse healthy, but still possibly wish pass into the Greninja at a later state, because Kofak most likely could not kill the Greninja from that point. That could be another way. I'm not saying either of those ways were like the better play. I'm just saying those are some alternative possibilities that could have happened and could have possibly won him the game. But it's not like the play Kelly ended up making was the wrong play or anything. I just felt like maybe those chances of winning for those plays might have been a little bit higher. Would have given him at least a chance, and I felt maybe that his play he made while safe also possibly it had no chance of winning. So I think at that point Kelly might have just been playing for differential, and like those plays obviously that I described were a bit riskier differential wise, but they could have possibly won him the game, depending on what plays Mono makes. And like at that point it's basically just theory mon of what could have happened. But I do like the way Kelly played. He played well, he prepped well, they both brought hazard stack. It was just a very hazard stack filled game, and that was definitely huge, because the Greninja was able to end up being put in range of Flash Cannon, and that's what ultimately was able to give Mono the win over Kelly. And now up next at number 5 we have Mono Tui, Mono and his Tampa Bay Luxrays. Not going to go into him too much, as I kind of touched on a lot of things. Again, Kelly could have possibly made a play near the end that could have won him the game. But definitely wasn't guaranteed chance at all, not even close. It probably would have still resulted in the same, because Mono would have had to lose about 2 50-50s, I believe, maybe even 3, all 3 of those, 2 or 3 of those to have lost that game. But I guess it's still possible. But Mono definitely played well. He definitely deserved the win. Bandit Victini, obviously Kelly had nothing for it, because especially with Rocks and Spikes, I believe he had his fire resistance was Darm, which Kelly actually brought a cool Darmanitan set that was Roar, which I forgot to mention when I was going over his ranking. But they definitely, both preps were very original. I felt like Kelly maybe was a little bit more original with his prep, but Mono played better in the game, and also Mono's prep didn't really need to be original, because Scarf, Hydreigon, Bandit Victini just did a lot of nefarious things to Kelly's team, to say the least, as those two were what basically ended up winning Mono the game, because every time Kelly could possibly get a kill with something, Hydreigon was there to revenge it, and all of Kelly's fat stuff he had in the Mew, the Aromatisse, the Fortress, any of that were threatened out, and for fear of a possible Bandit Victini. Now Rocks and Spikes were able to keep the Victini at bay and only allow it to claim 2 kills, but between the Victini claiming 2 kills and I believe the Hydreigon also put in the finest of work, that Kelly had little chance of winning, especially when Mono was playing at his best. So it was a very good game. I'd say this might have been the game of the week because it was a very close game. It was between two very good battlers, and definitely a heck of a game, guys. So congrats on that game. But I've spent long enough on this game because they're back-to-back rankings. So we are going to go up to number 4, and that is Eric and the Seattle Onyx. Actually, wait, I want to explain. I don't know if I explained why Kelly was still ahead of Better Jack, even though he lost and Jack won. The reason why I have Kelly at 6 and Better Jack did not move up is because I felt that Kelly was at number 2 before he lost, so I didn't want to move him down like too many spots. And at the same time, he lost to Mono, and he barely beat Mono, and he still had a chance of winning against Mono. So like those factors factored in with like the game that Jack played. I felt like Kelly should have had a little bit of edge, but it's very close between them. If Kelly was to lose next week and Jack was to win, then I would, especially with who Jack's playing next week, I would definitely move Jack above Kelly. But for now, I felt comfortable putting Kelly, even though he lost and Jack won, at number 6. But now we are moving on to Baby Eric and his Seattle Onyx. So Eric stays at number 4, and I'll explain why Jolt actually leapfrogged him in a second. But Eric played kind of poorly in this game, and he was kind of lucky to get bailed out by the fact that Jordan doesn't have a ground resist or immunity. So like no matter what, as long as he was able to neuter the Manaphy like he did, he was guaranteed the win, which he was able to do. But he could have honestly won this game like 5 or 6-0 had he not misclicked, which, you know, that happens. I can't like blame him too much. But then he also misplayed with Raikou and sent that in, and that died to Manaphy. So really, he probably should have won this game more than he did, and that's the main reason probably that I'm going to put Jolt above Eric. I'm putting Jolt above Eric, is that Eric kind of misplayed a little bit. He probably had he won from the get-go from with Lando. I'm sorry, I'm kind of stuttering over this. I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this, but Eric had team matchup, and he was actually in danger of losing to the Manaphy had Jordan maybe played it a bit better and not gone for the rest as the rain was ending. If he had gone for the Scald, gotten off damage, and he could have possibly had a better chance of winning. But Eric still played pretty alright, and he still was I was very impressed with his sets like the Sub SD Lando, the Cobalion, and yeah, other than that, not too much to say about that game, because I think I touched on it with the game when I was covering Jordan at number 12. Also, one thing before I move on, let me just tell you this, that Cobalion, or Kyurem is not a Cobalion switching, because that happened in that game, and I guess he didn't think he would go for it because he had a Mega Sableye, but Eric was able to just click close combat and kill the Kyurem. So that was an interesting play that I didn't agree with at all, but it worked out for Eric. So I bet he's not complaining too much. But moving on, we've got Jolt, and there is a big reason on why Jolt went from, I believe, number 8 to number 3. And well, first of all, I got a glimpse of how he can use the team that I described as maybe a little too bulky for my likes. I do like a bulky team, but I haven't seen too many bulky teams used well in the format, so that's why I'm kind of skeptical. But he proved to me that he can use his team very well, and it's not just a bulky team, it's a momentum-based team as well, and it can be quite threatening with the combination of like Thundy and Diggersby, and even like stuff like Scarf Decidueye. Like his Volt Turn is actually kind of insane with his offensive mons. But the main thing was that he just, outplayed Trav like every turn. I'll be honest, this is the most impressed. I've been friends with Jolt for about 2 years now, maybe a bit more, and I don't think I've ever seen him play a better game of Pokemon. It was like he added on a 1 at the end of week 1, and that's how he played, like he was playing at the end of the season and not week 1. He did not show any week 1 rust that a lot of players usually show, and he just dominated, arguably one of the best in the PPL. So that is why Jolt leapfrogged over basically everyone except for my top 2. And if Jolt continues to play like that, the top 2 better watch out. They better make sure they keep on winning, or else Jolt will easily steal their spot. But at number 2, we have Ruby and his Cleveland Bros. Now, he took on Paul and his West Coast Wingles, and he was able to pick up a win. I wasn't like terribly impressed by Ruby's performance. Like, he did play well, and his prep threw off Paul. But the main reason Ruby did move up is because he was number 3, and the number 2 team ahead of him lost. That's like, if he was more in the middle of the pack, he would not have been this high. But because he started out high and a team above him lost, he was able to move up naturally. But he did overpredict a few times. Overall, he did play really well. I know I just said I wasn't impressed, but I felt like he overpredicted for the sake of overpredicting. Like, I felt like those were unnecessary. Hydro pumping in the Toxapex the second time, while it might have been a roll, and while he did come 1 HP away from killing it, I felt like Draco was the play still, because even if Scizor did come back in, it would have still most likely died to a -2 Life Orb Hydro in the rain after taking a Life Orb Draco and Rocks. And on top of that, the other prediction he made was he surfed the Garchomp because he was expecting a Haban or Yachi. Probably, I think it was Yachi from what I remember him saying in his video. But I felt like Draco was still the play because, or even Hydro, like, I mean, if he's scared of him being Yachi Berry and possibly even Haban Berry, then Hydro was still the play, because you have an 80% chance to miss, or not miss. Oh god, if it had an 80% chance to miss, don't use Hydro ever. But I felt like he should have gone with the 80% chance, or possibly taken the risk that he was not Yachi Berry or Haban Berry, because if he did take that risk instead of going with Surf, which ended up not killing the Garchomp, then he would have just straight 5-0'd Paul, and that would have been game, would have just won with Kingdra. Whereas where it ended up is that Paul kind of misplayed around with me and Xiao and letting Scizor get burned, and that's why Ruby was able to pull it out. He did play really well, but I felt like his over predictions almost cost him a game that really should have been his without those. But good job for Ruby to make it number 2. But it is time for our number 1 team, and that is Shadi, coach of the Bayern Munich. Now, Shadi was the number 1 team in the preseason because I think his team was very, very good, and a lot of people agreed with me as well as Verd also agreed with me. We both had him number 1. But Shadi showed why he was number 1. He beat Will pretty badly. Obviously, it could have been a little closer if Will had not overpredicted, but Shadi was in control from turn 1 of the game. I didn't feel there was too many other games like that. Pretty much the only other game where I felt like a coach was in control from the get-go was the game between Jolt and Trav, where Jolt was in control basically from the get-go as well. I felt like very similar to this, not quite as strongly, but he was still in control basically the entire game. He double willowed and caught the Hippowdon, I believe, and so he didn't have to waste a turn hexing that. as he was able to get the willow off right away as it came in, and boom, right there, Tangrowth and Hippowdon were automatically burned, and that pretty much was able to allow Jirachi later on to come through and kill many things with Calm Mind. And let's see, what else from that game. I do think Shoddy probably should have clicked Wish against the Hitmonlee, or at least Protect, because I feel like the Endure was obvious. Obviously, he didn't need to make that play, but if Will did have like Poison Jab, which actually does do a little bit more than does do a little bit more than a resisted reversal against the Finny, and he had gotten a crit. I believe a crit Poison Jab could have killed. Now, Will obviously didn't have Poison Jab, and crit reversal, I'm pretty sure could not have killed either. But you know, that 6.25% chance or whatever it is always a factor. I feel like he would have risked the game a little bit less if he had clicked Protect or Wish with Rachi than if he would have done the play that he ended up doing. But you know, he won the game. I can't take too much away from him. Like, that was the only play I was kind of shaky on with him. Other than that, Shoddy played a fantastic game. Probably had the second best played game out of anybody this week behind Jolt. But other than that, that is it. This has been your boy Trev CL. Hopefully Verder's back with me next week. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the power rankings. Goodbye, peoples.